Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, a terrible homeowner association president trespasses on my farm and declares it as HOA property. He pulls a shotgun on me when I refuse to comply. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the story. And the first one starts like this. I was living on my farm long before an HOA was formed, and I knew right away that I wanted less than nothing to do with these people. It was all just a bunch of city boys thinking that developing a rural area would be a good idea for them, while at the same time looking down on all the locals like us for being less than them or something like that. I guess the idea of hard manual labor for a living just scares the crap out of them or something. Either way, I was not joining and told them as such when they offered it to me. Oh boy, I get to use some of my hard-earned money to just hand it over to these guys? I already have to do that. It's called taxes. I'm not having even more because they just want it. If they had left me alone after I told them no, then there wouldn't be any story right now. But instead, they were insistent on wanting my land to be a part of their homeowner association, and while I never found out why, I have a couple theories. So either they needed a certain amount/percentage of people in the area as part of their HOA, or they needed a certain amount of land as part of it, and the farms make up way more land than the residential homes. I don't actually care what their point or reasoning was, because my bigger issue was that the president was the biggest jerk I ever met. He would come up to me at least once a month and start trying to convince me to join the HOA. Always speaking slowly and with simple words like the issue was me being stupid and just not understanding what he was talking about. That grinded my gears more than anything so far, and I told him not so nicely to go F off. One day when he came on my land, it was a little bit of a different story, because the HOA president was not asking me anymore. Me? I told you to stay the hell off of my property and away from me. HOA president? Well, the HOA has decided that since you won't cooperate, we are claiming the land for us now. It is now HOA property, and you should probably get ready to pack up and leave. Me? That's total crap. This is my farm, and you have no right to just take it away. HOA president? I have paperwork that says otherwise, but we don't want to get all into that mess, do we? Instead, you can just sign the forms to join the HOA and keep your farm. Me? And if I don't? He went back to his car and came back with a shotgun. He pointed the damn thing at me. HOA president, you are really becoming a pain in my ass. And I know that nobody's gonna care if one more redneck like you is around. Maybe you will have a little accident if you don't start getting with the program. Me, I guess you're too dense to realize that farmers have shotguns too. Or that this state has a hold your ground law where if you trespass, I have the right to shoot you. We were in a bit of a standoff, but he finally put his gun down and left with one more warning that I had to sign the papers or something bad would happen to me. I did not sign crap, and the next day I found something not so great as my wake-up call. The HOA had destroyed some of my farm equipment to be spiteful for me not bowing down to their leader. With that alone, I did plan to try and sue them or something to get damages back at least. Before that happened, 2 days later, I spotted the HOA president trespassing yet again on my property at night. I could see that he had his shotgun on him again, so I decided to go ahead with my threat. I didn't want to kill him or anything, but I am a pretty good shot. I got him in the knee, and he somehow ended up hobbling back off the property and into his car. At that point, I knew to get a lawyer and filed a lawsuit before he tried to have me charged with shooting him or even attempted murder. My lawyer was an expert on HOAs and explained that at one point he was a lawyer for an HOA, but decided that after seeing too much he needed to do something better and started working against them. I felt like I was in really good hands here. Court stuff can get a little complicated, so I just want to break it down one charge at a time so I don't forget to mention anything, starting with me shooting him for trespassing on my property. Well, that was simple because he didn't even deny being on the property, but claimed that I still should not have been allowed to shoot him because he was not being a threat. Him having a gun and me having that on tape though ruined any chance he had at me getting away with it. And yeah guys, honestly, if you trespass on someone's property while having a shotgun with you, you should not be surprised if you get shot. Anyway, speaking of tape, I also had the one of him threatening to kill me and that whole conversation. One thing I loved about it is looking back on the tape, you can see that he does not even really know how to hold the shotgun. He is a city boy after all, and you can really tell it. Also, with that tape, it proved the second thing I wanted to mention, which was the forged documents claiming that the HOA owned my farm. He did end up trying to submit them as evidence of me being the one illegally on the property and it belonging to the HOA, even going so far as to submit the forms into the state to try and strengthen the claim. What he said to me was enough cause for the forms to get seriously looked over and declared as being forged. Finally, when it came to my farm equipment being destroyed, the HOA was gonna have to pay me the money to get entirely new equipment since they did stuff that could not be repaired. One example is my tractor could no longer take gasoline because they poured wet cement mix into the tank. Seriously, what a nice group. Wonder why I did not want to join. Aside from the fines they had to pay me and me not getting arrested for shooting him, they were still in even more trouble. The HOA president was criminally charged for forgery, trespassing and illegal ownership of a weapon. He did not have a license for the gun and threatening my life. He was going to prison for a good and long time because of all of that. Like 25 years when you put everything together, but I think he's able to serve the charges at the same time. The rest of the HOA didn't get off scot-free and were also in some serious trouble for helping him. For knowing that he had the forged documents and not reporting it, as well as being partially responsible for destroying my equipment. They didn't go to prison or anything, but had to leave the HOA board and were riddled with fines. I guess I was not such a dumb farmer after all, huh? And yeah, Ripe Stars, I really hope at some point all the people, especially those in HOAs, understand that you should not mess with a farmer, under any circumstances. Either way, if you enjoyed the stories, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and maybe even like the video, because that would help me tremendously. The next one is titled Property Lines Revenge. The neighbor's backyard behind me butts up against my backyard. I have a 6-foot fence and we both have trees on either side of it, so even in the winter, there's a decent amount of screening between us. Imagine my surprise one day when my youngest daughter came in and said, "I suppose you know that the neighbors built a shed right up against the back fence, right?" I rushed out to the back deck and sure enough, there was a 10x15 ugly ass shed literally a foot off of my fence. I called him up and said, "Hey, what's up with the new shed?" And he said he would come over and talk to me about it. Once he came over, I said, "Man, that thing's right on my property line and I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be 10 foot back." I asked him if he could move it back so it was not too much in our face when we were sitting on our deck. He claimed because of the slope of his yard and a drainage ditch, that was the only place that it could be. I was also worried that if we ever sold our house and it was surveyed, then it might become a big hassle. So my neighbor offered to buy a piece of my property to make it right, but only wanted to pay us $900. That is when my wife rolled on up from out of the house. She had known the neighbor for a long time and thought he was an a-hole already to begin with. So she immediately went for the throat. She told him that she needed a new refrigerator and the model she wanted cost $2,200, so that was the price for the land. Or she could just call zone enforcement to make him move it or start getting fined. Plus she told him that he was paying for the surveying and filing the property line adjustment. So that is the story of how my neighbor bought my wife a brand new fancy refrigerator. Update, thank you for the post upvotes and many comments. Thank you to all the trolls talking smack, at least I got your attention. People seem to be convinced that I sold 96 square foot per much less than market value. There's a 0.47 acre building lot for sale around the corner from me. It's on a really steep slope in the back like mine and has the same usable area as my lot. Based on the sale price of that lot, the square footage I sold my neighbor would be about $528. I sold it to him for $2,200. And the next one is a malicious compliance story. I used to work for a supermarket chain and quite often I would be asked by management to work at other locations. Most of the time, this was not a big deal. I was happy to help out, it gave me an excuse to drive and have the petrol paid for. However, one day I was asked to work at a location very far away at a very early hour of the morning. I initially refused on the grounds that I would have to wake up at around 2 AM in order to have a shower, breakfast and drive to be on site for 5 AM. After some arm bending from management, I finally relented and begrudgingly agreed that I would do it. Due to the drive not taking nearly as long as I initially expected, I arrived on location at about 4:30 AM. I waited in my car with the music playing at 4:50 AM. I get a loud knock on the car window, nearly making me jump out of my skin. It was the manager for that store who, never seeing me before, did not know who I was. The conversation went as follows. "Manager, you need to leave. This is private property." Me, "Oh but..." Manager interrupting, "I don't care. Go now." Me quickly realizing I can play this to my advantage. "Oh, I'm sorry, sir, I don't want any problems, of course I will go right away, sorry." And as per his request, I drove home with a smile on my face, knowing that I have the rest of the day free to myself. A few hours later, I get a phone call. I answered the unrecognized number and I recognized the voice immediately. It was the manager who told me to leave. Manager: "Hello, I'm looking for OP." Me: "Hi, yeah, that's me." Manager: "This is manager name calling from location. I was expecting you to work with me today. You should have been here for 5 a.m. Me, trying to sound casual: "Yeah, I was there waiting in my car. You told me to leave, remember?" Manager: "But you didn't say." Me, interrupting: "There are no ifs or buts. I was on private property and I was asked to leave. I was legally obliged to do so." Manager: "Right, but don't you think..." Me, interrupting: "It doesn't matter what I thought. I was asked to leave private property and I'm not gonna break the law and risk getting in trouble with the police." It was at this point that he hung up on me and I expected to get in trouble for what had happened, but I never heard anything more about it. This was a few years back now too. It's one of my favorite stories to tell. I hope you enjoyed. The next one is a neighbor am I the a-hole story. So I have been away since Thursday, the house sitting for my mom, and it's currently Sunday afternoon where I live. Here, mail does not deliver on weekends, they only do that on Monday to Friday, which means I had 2 days worth of mail in my mailbox. My 30-something-year-old neighbor moved in on Friday when I was not here. She was in her front yard when I was collecting my mail. She goes, "Don't check your mailbox on weekends. They don't deliver on weekends, so don't check it." In a very rude Karen voice: if you know, then you know. Already I know we are not gonna have a good neighbor relationship and I'm hungover and I cannot be bothered dealing with her crap, so I said, "I know, it's just I've been kidnapped in the basement for a week, so I had to check the mailbox. I don't have a basement, barely anyone does in my country." She seemed shocked, but it was an obvious joke with my overly sarcastic tone. Then we both went inside and that was that. About 25 minutes later, the police knocked on the door, thinking I was held captive in my basement, which I don't have, so I explained to them what I had said and they just laughed and left. Just before, I was putting rubbish in the bin and she came out and called me an idiot for making her think I was kidnapped. And yeah, Ripe Stars, it very much seems that this lady needs to learn how to mind her own business. Honestly, it's just infuriating to see people who are so nosy and who are so eager to get into other people's business. I don't know where that comes from. Maybe these people have too much free time on their hands or something? Honestly, I wish I had that much free time. Anyway, someone in the comments said, "Not the a-hole, some people just need to mind their own damn business. Who cares when you check your mail? Also, some people just don't understand sarcasm." At least she cared enough to call the cops for you though. Good thing they were cool about it. Comment number 2, not the a-hole. You're not an a-hole, but her conscience probably wouldn't let her sleep just in case you were not joking. To most it probably seems silly, but better safe than sorry, I guess. And the next one is an I don't work here lady story. And please let me know in the comments whether you kind of enjoy the mix-up we are doing here, because lately I've also been including some I don't work here lady stories here and there. I think it's good to have some variety, but obviously if you don't care about these stories, then I will just leave them out. About 14 years ago, when Reliance Security provided security for Tesco stores, I also worked for Reliance but was based at the airport. One morning, after a 12-hour night shift, I decided to go into a Tesco store that I pass on the way home and get a sandwich. I had my work uniform on, but I was wearing a grey jacket on top so people would know that I am not on duty. So then I go into the store and pick up a basket and headed to the sandwich counter, and I'm browsing the selection and I hear someone say, "Excuse me." But not expecting anyone to be talking to me, I carry on looking for my desired sandwich. Then suddenly the basket is slapped out of my hand and there is this snarling man's face less than an inch from mine and he says, "I'm not paying you to shop, get to the front of the store right now." So I'm tired and very confused and I can only muster the reply, "What?" He said, "I told you to get to the front to us. We've been open for customers for the last 30 minutes and you've not been at your position once, and now I find you buying snacks." That is when the penny dropped and I simply replied, "I know the store is open to customers. I am one. I work for the same company who provides security, but I'm not your guard." With those words ringing in his ears, all the color in his face drained away when he realized what he had just done to a customer. Suddenly he became completely apologetic and said if there was anything he could do for me, he would gladly help. I informed him that I would like help carrying my basket around the store as I was tired from a long night shift, and he replied he would get someone to help me immediately, and I then told him I did not want someone else to carry my basket, I wanted him to carry it. So I originally only intended on buying a sandwich, but to teach this guy a lesson, I spent 30 minutes in the store and went in every aisle. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I gotta say, for me, this story was brilliant because it combined petty revenge and I don't work here lady stories. That is how it should be. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. The area where I live used to be all farmlands where properties were large and mostly grounds for planting. That was back in the days when my grandparents and even great-grandparents owned it. Over time though, the farms got sold and the land cut up, where now people have a home and usually a small back garden. I kept the family farm though and want to do my best to run it the way I can. The residents though seem to hate that I still keep it as a farm and did not sell the land and let more homes be built. They think that I am being stubborn, but really, I love my family's legacy and truly enjoy the work of a farmer. Still, the land is not huge and I've been having many problems when it comes to storage. I have multiple sheds because I found it the easiest way to store things the most effectively. So I had the idea to try and create a site to process the waste on my farm to save on space. The town though rejected the application, so I was left with trying to figure out even more ways to save space on the farm. I have bales of hay and nowhere to put them. I had them in the middle of my fields, but still, the neighbors constantly complained and were trying to get the town to shut down my farm and force me to sell the property. I was sick of these people who wanted a nice view right through my property and didn't want me doing anything to disturb it. At one point, the neighbor who lived behind my property came up to talk to me. "Neighbor, are you kidding me with these hay bales?" "Me? I need to put them somewhere. They are in my fields. It doesn't concern you." "Neighbor, it's an eyesore. Why don't you move them to the other side of the property?" "Me? I cannot. My sheds are over there. I have a farm to run and I have the right to do what I want with my own property." "Neighbor, we will see about that. We stopped that stupid waste idea of yours and I will make sure that the town makes you shut down for this one." Now, I had always been raised to not let anybody mess with me, so I decided to get a little revenge while at the same time complying with what my neighbor asked and moved the hay bales out of the middle of my field. Honestly, the new idea was much easier for me, I just didn't do it before because I was trying to be polite. Screw politeness now though, he was going to get a taste of how it seemed to have your neighbor finally take some revenge. I got some trailers and lined them up against the back fence of my property, the very same fence I shared with the neighbor. Then I started to stack the hay bales right on top of the trailers, making his view of my property impossible, and all he was able to see now were the hay bales. Keep in mind, I did everything according to law and was well within my rights to put them there. It was my property after all, and none of it was leaking onto his or stored in a way that it could fall onto his property. The neighbor got pissed, and when he came out and saw what was going on, he came over to me screaming that he was going to get me arrested for what I had done and then stormed back into his home. It was hard not to smile when I saw that my 30-foot tall wall of hay bales pissed him off. If you think it was kind of extreme that this guy was known to try and call the cops on me at least once a month over something stupid like the watering of my crops being too loud or even him claiming half of my land belonged to someone else. This revenge was long overdue, so I didn't feel bad about it. He, of course, did try and do something about it in the form of calling the fire department, saying that my wall was a fire hazard. I let them come and inspect it to see that they were stored properly and were not considered a fire hazard at all. I shook their hands and they went on their way with the report that nothing was wrong with it. That was really the only thing neighbor could have tried to do, because if it was a hazard, it didn't matter whose property it was on. The wall stayed and neighbor got mad and actually tried to sue me for it. It did not get to the courts though, because no lawyer he talked to could find anything illegal about the bales of hay. In fact, him calling the fire department worked in my favor because of the report they wrote saying that they were stored properly and were not a danger to anyone or anything. He shot himself in the foot with that one and could not do anything else but complain about the wall and insult me. He loved to go around and call me a bully for intentionally making his view horrible. It was clear that he wasn't actually worried about safety or even the hay going onto his property, he just wanted a nice view at my expense. Now I know some people are wondering well what I'm going to do with a 30-foot wall of hay bales. As much as I would love to keep it up indefinitely to bother him more, it will slowly dwindle down over the next few months. I need to use it to feed the animals when it gets cold and they need to stay indoors. It will also get used like a mulch in the spring for my soil. The crops I grow are very good and part of the reason is that I take really good care of my soil. I don't want to be too much of a jerk of a neighbor, so I don't really know what I will do about my bales of hay when the next summer rolls around. The only thing that is stopping me from doing it over and over again is that I know some of my other neighbors who are nice people that didn't really like what I did either. For their sake, I might find a new storage option for my bales of hay, and if neighbor keeps messing with me, I'm sure that I can find another method of revenge. When you live on a farm, there are always plenty of things to work with to put a jerk neighbor in his place. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.